to the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast. If you're a clay target shooter, then we have what you're looking for. Speaking with some of the best in the industry about the game you're passionate about. Subscribe to the Clay Lab on YouTube and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform. The Matson Shooting Academy Podcast is brought to you by Castellani USA, Greenwood Custom Stocks, and Ranger Eyewear. Here's your host, Cody Matson of Matson Shooting Academy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast. I'm Cody Matson, your host. Very excited to join the Clay Labs Network and podcast. I have a very special guest on this evening, the one, the only Dr. Richard Colo. Doc, super happy to have you on tonight.
Wow, I'm so happy to be here, Cody. I really enjoyed the time you spent up with me for a couple days before the Orvis get-together with all the big boys. And boy, anything that I can help with, you go ahead and ask away.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time on that. You know, I had that rare opportunity where you and I, both our schedules aligned, and I got to spend almost 2 days with you at the office, and we went to the Hartford Gun Club, and that's just such a super special opportunity for me that I can't tell you how much I enjoyed that and how much I learned from that. It was just super valuable in my coaching and everything.
Well, to be able to spend a couple days with someone at your level, you weren't the only one that learned. It's a circumstance where, I always say, I taught for a couple of years at the school, and boy, that first year that I was teaching, I learned twice as much as I did the 4 years I was in school. So having someone at your level, I learned a lot those 2 days also, Cody.
Well, thank you. With the eyes, in our game, seeing is everything. And, when you took me through the comprehensive eye exam at the office, I mean, you were so thorough and detailed oriented. I found all that just so comforting to me to know that, my prescription was exactly right. I'm seeing the best that I could possibly see. And I think it's shocking to me how many times I encounter a new student that, can't see or doesn't know they can't see. How often do you get somebody that comes and sees you and, you get them in a prescription and they're just blown away?
It's shocking to me. It really is. Okay. And I'm talking about some darn good shooters. You recognize the name, which I guess is saying that, okay, the brain can do magnificent things. That's for sure. What I'm trying to achieve is an environment of visual control where, I guess the best way I can explain it, Cody, is when people ask me what I do, say the best thing that I do is I make it more fun. And what I mean by that is the more you can be in visual control of the target, putting yourself in a position to let the shot happen rather than make the shot happen.
Yeah.
It's almost like an endorphin feeling. It's kind of like when you hit a softball so square that you don't even feel the weight of the ball.
Yeah.
When you hit a 3-wood off of a tight line and you don't, it just jumps off the club right to left. It's like you didn't even hit it. Same thing happens when you do everything right, okay, where you're letting that trigger, okay, be pulled rather than trying, okay, to make it.
That's
And
right.
today, okay, I had someone today that it was all hands first, take the barrel to the bird, look for the picture and pull the trigger. The first time he went eyes first, he just turned and looked at me and said, "Oh my God."
So I'm going to stop you there because on the skeet field, when we went to the Hartford Gun Club, you talked to me about the difference in eyes first and the difference in hands first. Okay. So I want to make sure that the listeners understand what the difference is in the two. Okay. So when you said he went hands first to the target, can you expand on that? Can you say what you saw when he did that?
In other words, when he yelled pull, he immediately barreled to the bird. I see that so much at different levels. And so what's happening here is once you go hands first, then you're measuring right from pull. What happens is, if you go hands first now, you're taking the barrel to the bird, you're looking for the relationship between the bird and the barrel. You're looking for the picture. Now, our history here in the United States has really perpetuated that to such a significant degree. I took the gun, grabbed it myself, and I said, Jeff, I'm going to shoot this bird 3 times one way and then 3 times another way. So we're on low 7 of a skeet field, and I yelled, pull, and I purposely looked right at the front bead of the gun. So I immediately took that barrel to the bird. I did that 3 times. And then the next 3 times, I made sure I saw the bird first and let my eyes take my hands. So what did he say? Because I instructed him to just look at the end of the barrel. So although the whole point was the same, although the visual timing was the same, what he saw was a sudden move of the barrel and then a hesitation and then bang. What he saw the second time was eyes taking the hands. So the movement of the gun, even though the visual timing was the same, the movement of the gun was minimal because the target had achieved a certain distance, minimizing that angle.
That's right.
And
That's so interesting for you and I to be over a shooter's shoulder. I mean, the difference in hands first and eyes first is so obvious to us. But to a shooter that, isn't aware of that, it's not so obvious. And,
that's why it's such an epiphany. Okay. Even, and this happens so much, I could start calling off names, even at your level, although you were eyes first. Okay. You were not at the level that we finally recognize.
that's right.
And for you, it's a little bit of a different feel because to the eye doctor, lead is a feel. It's not a visual. And so it's a little more letting it go. To him, it was an absolute epiphany.
Sure.
Like, oh my God. And then for him to have missed 3 out of 4 targets, okay, initially, and then break 6 in a row, he wanted to quit and go home. It was
bet.
it was great. It was good. But a big part of this, I don't think I've really discussed this in any of the podcasts. Most clay target shooters, at least up until this last decade in sporting clays, started off in skeet or trap or both. Now, in skeet, American skeet, and American trap, there's time for the conscious to get involved. But there's one thing in both of those games that allows you to do it wrong and shoot hundreds. You're exhausted, okay, but you can do it. The one thing is relative speed.
Correct.
For a given presentation, the picture is always the same. By picture, I mean the relationship between the bird and the bird. So if you do go hands first, taking the barrel to the bird and looking for that picture, you can shoot hundreds. Okay. However, the moment you go from that environment into the sporting clays or feed house environment, where now for a given distance, for a given angle, one target's going 20 miles an hour and the other's going 60 miles an hour, it all falls.
Yeah, and we don't get the luxury of knowing that every bird is, 48 miles an hour and it's at this, this is high 2 and it's the same every single time.
It's even beyond that. By that I mean, Cody, it's a circumstance where even if you're off dominant, creating an environment where if you're shooting both eyes open and conscious of that bird barrel relationship, even if you're off dominant, like for example on a field, if you were central dominant shooting right-handed, then high 4, okay, would need more lead than low 4.
Correct.
If you're conscious. If you're on a trap field, then on peg 1 with a hard left, you hardly have to lead it. On peg 5, with a hard right, you got to lead it by a suburban. But even if you're off dominant like that, you can learn those different pictures.
Right.
Now, when you occlude someone, when they shut an eye or you have a patch, now for a completely different reason, you still have to do it the right way. Because everyone can do this. If you just look off in the distance and point at something, okay, with your finger, and look at what you're pointing at, your finger's kind of there. Then close an eye, and you see how much more vivid your finger is. So, for the person that's occluded, the front of the gun is as vivid as the target. So if you hold on at all, brain's going to want to go to. So whether you're off dominant or whether you're occluded, the solution's exactly the same.
Yeah. And, for the listener, what you're describing, I want to back up just a little bit on that and really get some folks understanding where your role comes into the equation. Okay. When us as shotgun shooters, our job, in my opinion, is to supply our brain with the best visual input possible coming from that clay target. And that effortless motion that you talked about, and how it just happens rather than you have to make it happen. That all
Yep.
comes from streaming a constant flow of data from that clay target to your eyes, right? And the optical nerve, transfers that, information.
Yep.
But I think that so many shooters that I coach at the moment of truth, they're doing such a great job. You're over their shoulder, you're watching them, they're swinging beautifully with that bird, and you think they're gonna hit it, and then all of a sudden, the hands slow, you can see the eye detach from that target. And I'm going to say that the vast majority of people that are missing at the end of that shot, when you feel like you have it, they're visually disconnecting at that moment of truth. So can you speak to seeing that bird clear through that break zone and what that is actually doing?
Absolutely. Dominance is a moot issue if you're minimizing any conscious relationship between the bird and the barrel. What I'm saying here, and I think, I'm not sure, most of the stuff I say, I'm getting from some, okay, if it has to do with the mechanics of shooting or whatever. But I think it was Chris Baffin that said this. You've got to see the lead, but you never look.
Right. It's peripheral.
Seeing the lead is subconscious. Looking at the lead is conscious.
And that's a great description.
So people talk about how, well, I've gotten older and now, okay, my dominance has changed. My left eye's taken over. Sometimes, okay, I'm shooting fine. And then all of a sudden, my left eye's taking over. The dominance doesn't change. Now, don't get me wrong. There's certain things that change dominance, physiological. Okay. But those things are not things that are transient in nature. In other words, there's been a lot of studies. Visual acuity does not affect dominance. So you can bring vision all the way down to 2200 and it's not going to affect the dominance. What affects the dominance is what they call neutral density filtering. A gray lens. Okay. Less light getting into the eye will tend to make things shift. So those Bangalore filters that they use, I think there's a company from England that has them, or you can get them. Okay, these Bangalore filters that they use for working with amblyopia with kids with lazy eyes, they reduce the vision, but it's not the reduction in the vision, okay, that gives you an effective dominant shift. Okay, it's they're blocking out the amount of light coming in. That's the reason, okay, that the vision is not good enough.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We might as well bring up a very important. So many shooters come to see me that their eye doctor trying to do the right thing, okay, understanding that there's a dominance issue, will blur the off eye. In other words, blurring the dominant eye to try to get it more of a shift. Well, unfortunately, the way all blur the eye is to add more plus power to reduce the vision and the distance. Well, when you had the plus power, you're making that eye blurry in the distance, but the front of the gun is clear as can be.
And that's going to promote aiming.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's the last thing you want.
exactly.
Yeah, creating that environment.
So you mentioned, when the shooter goes to their normal eye doctor. So I've gone to several eye doctors throughout the years, and I've had a hard time getting my eye doctor to understand that, my occupation, is shooting a shotgun, and I have to see crisp and clear detail at 40, 50, 60 yards on that. And that, 2020, if I can be better than that, I want to be, right? Because it's not just being about being safe to drive. I'm trying to do something extraordinary with my eyes here. And when you took me through that finesse testing and with all the depth perception, colorblind and contrast and all those different things, you told me that with my prescription of my eyes that I was seeing, 2010. And you told me that you don't get very often you get people in the office that are seeing to that level, but what should the average, person, the folks that can't come and see you and go through all this wonderful testing, what should they be talking to their eye doctors about to make sure they have the right prescription in their shooting glass?
Yeah, I've dealt with that for decades. Okay, one thing I did learn, if you're an old fart optometrist from Connecticut, you don't want to tell some eye doctor below the Mason-Dixon line how to do an eye exam.
Got
That's
it.
okay.
Got
Keep
it.
me away from Georgia. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But I think there's a right way to approach it, and I think it gets the point across. One
Okay.
is never, ever have your eyes dilated before you have them check the prescription for your glasses.
Okay. That's a good one.
Because that dilation is going to support more plus power, which works against infinity.
Okay. Yeah,
Second,
that's good.
tell the doctor that one of the main reasons you're there is you want to see shadows and reflections on a clay target at 40 yards. So what are you telling them now? You're telling them that you want the absolute best correction for infinity. Now, a good eye doctor, when someone's in their mid 40s, 50s, 60s, he may lean more towards backing off a little on to make you more comfortable in a room type of environment.
Sure. Well, my eye doctor
You
locally, she said when we went through this last prescription, she would only sign off on them as occupational because she said she would not put a normal individual in those glasses for the fear that it would be too strong indoors or anything like that. But I'm only going to wear them outdoors, and you confirm that prescription when we work together there. So you can push the envelope, right?
Cody, that's the perfect example. So what you're telling them, maybe I haven't gotten into it at it. Me. I remember John Dayrich, who I've done a lot of shooting with. We were going over the reasons for flinching and all that stuff. And I've got a whole thing that I've done on that time doesn't give us right now. But okay, that's a real work in progress right now. But having said that, so I spent about 15, 20 minutes explaining, to John, the reasoning. And so we happened to be driving down to Anthony's. And so he was taking a lesson with Anthony, and I was with him. So he posed the question to Anthony. Anthony said in one sentence what it took me 20 minutes to say. So we got to be a little careful about me. At the medical center, I know one of the doctors, he would tell the patients, they told us when we graduated that if you hear hoof beats, you think of horses. Colo thinks of zebras. So I tend to look into things maybe a bit too much at times. But it's your job, guys, out there to take the meat from the chaff. But let's
right.
get into so let's get into this. Optical infinity is 20 feet. So the light rays are parallel to the eye at 20 feet. They're parallel to the eye at 100 feet, at 1,000 feet, at 100 miles. So there's no change in the light once you get to 20 feet. And the older folks with single lens reflex cameras realize that, if you focus on someone 10 feet away and then you go to the mountain, you got to click it out to infinity. And so, perfect example here is you've seen it in print so many times, you've seen it so many DVDs, where so many instructors will say, you've got to look beyond the target line and come back to the target. You can never go inside the target line because it's so much easier to focus your eyes than it is to relax the focusing. Not true. Okay, once you get to 20 feet, there isn't any focus. So it's more visual attention on the target. However, what is true is you should be doing it. What's the reason that we should be doing it? It gets us further away from the gun.
Absolutely. Yeah, way
That's the
way
reason.
out. It gets your eyes as far away as possible from the gun.
Okay.
Now, so you might be able to speak to this, and I'm 100% with on the parallel light, but what I see when somebody is looking beyond the line of the target, their eyes are further than the line of the target, they're much more likely to go first to that target than hands first.
How come?
With the eye is further separated from the gun.
Boy, it's like I was your straight man on that one. Okay. I was pretty confident. I usually don't, ask questions. You could have gone south on that one.
Yeah,
Absolutely, Cody.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But
Okay.
that's the
It's
but
so
that's the
much easier. So now you got to remember, boy, do you have to remember, I'm very confident of my eye doctor shoes. Okay. So I may be saying things contrary to what you're teaching or contrary to the philosophy some of the instructors have out there, but I can't leave my eye doctor shoes. So it's up to you guys to, again, separate, what makes sense and maybe what doesn't make sense to the shooter or shooting instructor as opposed to the eye doctor.
But I mean, you've been
And
so helpful in diagnosing, with the eyes and the shift and all of that, we are so thankful to have that outlet. And, I think I remember Will saying, you've just confirmed our suspicions on so many of these things, and you can back it with, the working knowledge and the fact on that. And it's just,
so,
you're just such a
Cody,
wonderful resource.
let's be more specific to the eye doctor. If you say bang where the target looks the best, pick your detail. Okay. If that area is, say, 100 feet and the trap is 140 feet to the right of you. For the eye doctor, I don't care whether you're looking right at the arm or whether you're looking beyond. Okay. In other words, the distance to your eye pickup point for the eye doctor should always be, greater than the distance to the break.
Yeah. And that's a good
Now,
visual for people to picture that as well.
if it's so let's say the break point's 100 feet and the trap's 20 feet away. You can be looking right along that arm as long as your eye pickup point is 120 feet or 1,000 feet.
Right.
Okay.
Beyond.
Okay.
Yes.
Beyond. Yeah. So you may want to be looking off in the trap. All this stuff is way above my pay grade. But all I know is for the eye doctor, you always want to be going out.
Yes. And it's so obvious when somebody does just the fluidness of that initial motion versus that, that rapid panic move where the hands throw and, and everything's chaotic from there, which is huge because if that's how a shot starts, if it starts in panic, if it starts, with that amount of anxiety in there, I think, and this is, only my observations, but I think that equates to visual panic. I think how you are feeling in that
Absolutely,
shot,
Cody.
I think the eyes will
Absolutely.
dart back and forth. And
No one has said this better. No one has said this better then Zach. Zach, a few years ago, Zach and Des were up to see me. Des was in the chair, and I said to Des, I said, Des, you got to make pulling the trigger a result, not an action. The action is the moment of greatest visual attention. Zach jumped up and said, I like that guy. He said, I'll give you one. For a year and a half, all I said to myself was, see the bird late, watch it.
That's solid
It took,
advice.
it took me a bit to really fully understand that, but not a long time. So for the eye doctor, what Zach is saying is not so much see the bird late, right? For the eye doctor, he's saying don't see the bird too clear. Let's just pick an arbitrary number. Let's say that the eyes have 100 units of visual attention. So what Zach is saying, of course, this is dependent on the, depending on the presentation. Hey, sometimes Target Center sets it up. You even have to shoot it on the blur. Okay, what Zach is saying, when you first see the bird, those 100 units go into the area of, let's say, a softball. Then, okay, you ratchet that attention down into the area of a baseball and ratchet that attention down into the area of a ball. And then at a P, at that moment of greatest visual attention, the gun goes off. Everything inside of that moment is active in terms of the level of attention on the target, i.e. subconscious. Everything over that line is passive, i.e. conscious. You go over that line, and now you're starting to take your eye off the bird, increasing the conscious relationship between the bird and the barrel.
Yeah, and there's a miss coming next.
If you're patched, if you're off dominant, okay, then you fall off the cliff.
Right. Yeah,
If
it's
you're
bad. It's ugly
solid
from
on
there.
either side, then you just slow down and miss.
Yeah.
So
now,
as long as you're active with
visually
that
active.
visual attention,
Yeah.
and that it's a vehicle. That's all it is.
Sure.
Maybe there's other vehicles out there that other instructors are using that are better. I don't, but it's a vehicle to give the conscious a difficult enough task. Keep it out of the way.
And leave that to the subconscious to juggle everything else. Now,
yeah. Okay. Well, if it's just the subconscious, there's no such thing as dominant.
right.
I'm letting that one sink in. In other words, if you're on a skeet field and you're shooting low one and your left eye dominant shooting right-handed, if you take the barrel to the bird and look for the picture, you got to shoot 2 feet behind that bird to break it.
Right, which
But
makes
if you're
no
just
logical
looking
sense.
if ratcheting your attention onto a spot on that bird, in that moment of greatest attention, gun goes off, brain knows what to do.
Being able to articulate that to the student, I always use
It's so cool. I mean, I think that's why I do this. I just love it. I love it to death.
Getting them to see that, that sharp focus is fleeting, right? Once you achieve that, pea-sized focus that you described, the gun's got to go off.
You can't do it 100 times. It's even more than that. I think there's a lot of birds that are lost because you're trying too hard to see a specific detail in it.
I agree. And they need to be in your show pairs. If you got a clay target sitting right in front of you and you use the analogy of 10 out of 10 is crystal clear and 1 is I can't see anything, when that target setter set that bird, and if it's only ever a 6 and you hang on to that bird hoping it's going to be an 8, that's a problem, right? That's when we go over that line and it's just not going to work.
Absolutely. And, I hope I don't get myself into trouble here. I think I shot behind the last 2 times at the RC Cup in the Bay. Okay. I was with Wendell and I shot behind Wendell one of the times. And so, there's times he's so fast to the bird. And so I was convinced there had to be times that he's going heads first. There's no way he could be that bad sometimes. I watched him. You know me, okay? I watched every shot. Okay, not one time was he ever hands first. His mechanics are just so good that it's an all let it happen thing. It's just so gorgeous to watch. On the flip side, I've done so much shooting with Wilson, and yet will get placement, connection, and slowly pull away. And it's the exact same thing. Okay, Wendell is at that moment of greatest attention, the gun goes off. Will is at that moment of greatest attention, the gun goes off.
Yeah, they're just achieving it at different
Yeah,
positions in
but
that
as
bird's
long
flight.
as you don't go over that line, as long as you don't go over that line from active to passive, you're all set.
And getting shooters to achieve that visual control, a way that you can understand if you are or you aren't getting in visual control of that bird is the moment that your eyes truly latch and the moment that the gun synchronizes with the bird. The shot itself almost feels as if the whole process just slows down. And in that slowdown, I think you've latched, you've hooked, you've connected, and that synchronization on top of the sharp focus, that's your cue, right? That's your,
Yes.
yeah, I've achieved what I've set out to do.
Dave Fetchy, a joy to watch shoot. When he won, the bronze medal, in the World Fetus over in Hungary, that last day, he cleared a parkour that no one in the entire field got a 25 on that.
That boy, Cage. Way to go.
Okay. And he shot a 49. So when he called me, I asked him, I said, hey, he shot well in London at the World English the week before. I said, what was the difference between London and Hungary? He didn't even wait a nanosecond. He said, in London, I was trying to make it happen. In Hungary, I was just letting it happen. There were times, I'm quoting him, there were times the gun went off when I didn't even know it was going off in the target.
That's pretty special.
We're getting into something really good here. Okay, because I'm going to back this up with the World Fetus. So, talking with Will Fennell after the World Fetus, and he shot very well. In his, concurrent, I believe shot a 180. I hope I got the number right. Okay, but anyways, okay.
He's going to hold you to that. You know that,
No,
right?
I know. So I asked him, which I tend to do. I tend to ask, how things went, and he said, it was interesting. He said, I've been doing this for so long. I just don't see that many targets that I've never seen before. And I had a bunch of them this time that I really didn't know. All I said to myself was, when that moment, greatest attention on that target, gun goes off. And he said, I couldn't believe how many I don't want to misquote him, but what he was saying was, I was just looking at the target, and when it felt right, the gun went.
Yeah,
In
he
other
was
words,
trusting himself.
he wasn't carrying anything else into it.
Sure. Putting a thorough and detailed plan in place and trusting yourself is probably the hardest element, to just have that full faith, right? Relinquish the control of the gun to your coordination system, get out of your own way, and let those shots happen.
Yes,
Don't force it.
I think there's a vehicle. One of the big differences I feel between the big boys and the rest of us is when something goes wrong, dragonfly lands on the end of the gun or
Trap
a leaf
malfunction.
goes, yeah. When something goes wrong, we mortals always default to the pitch. We default to the lead. Big boys look harder.
Sure. Try to fix it with focus.
Yeah. Now, when I say look harder with the target, the one thing we got to understand, well, I might as well go into the second thing that the big boys do, that we don't. The big boys have the detail in their conscious plan to determine for them at this station, at this time of the day, in this environment, the best that target is. And I got this from Anthony. In other words, I kind of defined it. He came out. If 0 is you can't see the target at all, and 10 it's absolutely clear and crisp, they have the detail in their conscious plan to determine right now that's a 6. So when it's a 6, the gun goes off.
They've already predetermined that.
Because if they didn't do that and tried to make it 8 out of a 6, now they're holding on.
Right. And they
Now
know
it's,
to turn loose. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're strong dominant, right eye, left eye, you just slow down so you get some of them. But if you're off dominant, R2L, like in between the right eye and the nose, okay, shooting right-handed, okay, then if you do that, you fall off the cliff. People that are off dominant, okay, they either shoot really well or off. They don't shoot in between.
You're correct in that.
The
Yeah.
same way people will say, well, sometimes my left eye's taking over. Your left eye's not taking over. What's happening is your balance between conscious and subconscious involvement is askew.
Right.
And that's exactly what happens with flinching. There may be other reasons for flinching, but related to the eyes, flinching happens when you go over that line from active to passive. If you can stay active, you're not going to flinch.
Yes.
I'm doing a whole other thing.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about that, because that is something that I commonly encounter is somebody that flinches, and we'll definitely be talking more about that.
That's good, because I'll tell you, we don't want to do too much today. The reason I say that is we've hit a really salient situation.
I agree.
Really, really have. Okay, and I don't want to muddy any waters here. Take that to another point. That big study that they did in London, they found that every one of the Olympic shooters slowly accelerated the gun to maximum acceleration, and the gun went off. Every one of the high-level club shooters, it was sudden target panic, then slowing down making. So you're describing the hands there, but, good old Zach, seeing the bird too clear too soon, and then, getting acid in terms of your visual.
And I can tell you that's a personal issue that I've struggled with. I do see extremely well, and seeing it too clear too soon, there's a lot of times I'll have to delay that visual intensity, until that
Cody,
optimal break point.
Cody, in 12 years of doing that M&S Technologies, the way you read through that 2010 line, I don't think there's 5 people that I've seen with sharper detail or acuity at that level.
That was pretty neat. It confirmed
no. Bottom line here is, you can't screw up. You got no excuse there.
Yeah, when we told Will that, he said, "Well, that's great. You have no excuses." So, well, okay. So before we wrap all this up, you showed me this super cool smart board that you are now doing all these virtual sessions on.
Yes.
So for folks that can't get to the office and really want to understand more in depth of what we're doing, because you can do the visuals on there, right? You draw, you showed me all the different things, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about those virtual sessions and what you do in them.
What I've been able to do is take the whole office part minus, the M&S technology that I do before I go out in the field. My son's a producer for Marvel TV. And so he was on strike for 4 months. So he came home for 3 months. He had gutted one of our guest rooms and turned it into a conference room. And I bought a 4,500-hour digital whiteboard.
Which is awesome.
So now I'm able to do dominance testing, objective, subjective, and then all of this visual control stuff, kind of taking, a medical history and shooting history and eye history, and kind of taking where someone is coming from and where they want to go. If I've got someone that's going to shoot a few boxes a week for 3 months out of the year, that's one thing. But if I have someone that's going to leave their job and try to win the U.S. Open in 2 years, that's another. I can take all of that stuff and kind of put it in perspective. And what it does is puts a lot of stuff to bed. It's really working out very, very
well. And most people, being, a visual cognitive learner, we can talk about all this stuff, but for them, even when you drew out for me, I've heard you say so many times, a shooter's got to shoot on the be a bang, but just you drawing that out on that board and actually having that visual, it made so much more sense. But that whole session is recorded, is it not? Doesn't
Yeah,
the shooter get a copy of that as well?
exactly. And then that's another big plus. The entire
Yeah.
thing is recorded.
Right. So they don't have to remember everything as they
Yeah.
go with it. But I thought that was a great resource for folks that can hop on their computer and reach you that way versus, a plane ticket or whatever else for an office visit.
And I really enjoy doing it. I really,
Yeah.
really do. So many more things we can talk about, but I
I
think
agree.
we really hit some salient points.
I
You
hope
know?
the folks listening enjoyed it, and I'd love to do a part 2 with you because I have so much more stuff to talk to you about, with the glasses and everything.
We will. Yes, I'd love
Yeah.
to do that.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to have you back on.
I feel very honored to be asked to kind of do your initial podcast. I know we're
Absolutely.
looking forward to more and more in the future. That's for sure.
Well, good. Well, I do appreciate your time, and I hope we get to do this again very soon. And I'd just like to, thank all the listeners for tuning into this. And I think it was a great first run at it, and I think we covered a lot of information, and hopefully that it answered a lot of the questions out there.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform to the Clay Lab so you don't miss an episode. Check out MatsonShootingAcademy.com or reach out to Cody at MatsonShootingAcademy@gmail.com. Consider joining as a channel member too by clicking that join button below on YouTube for early access to videos and podcasts. We'll catch you here next time on the Matson Shooting Academy Podcast.